Welcome to the Charles M. Schlz Museum and Research Center. I'm Jean Schlz. You know, when Sparky and I first began talking about the museum, we were thinking simply of a place where Peanuts fans could see his original comic strips. But after Sparky died, I felt it was also important to make it a place of tribute to this wonderful man who brought us all so much joy. Before you begin your visit, there are a few things I'd like to tell you that I think will make the experience more lasting. First, you should know that this museum could have been located anywhere. The legacy of the cartoon strip and its characters is international. But we picked this particular spot because for the last 30 years, Sparky's life was centered here, around the studio, his ice arena, and this neighborhood. So when you come here, you are, in a real sense, entering into Sparky's world. It was in this studio, just a few minutes walk from here, that he drew the Peanuts comic strip day after day, dipping his pen into a bottle of India ink and bringing forth from his mind a setting, a cast of characters, a story, and at the end some little twist that caught you up short and made you think, oh yeah. Sparky said his job was fundamentally drawing funny pictures, but we all know it was so much more than that. Sparky's working days used to start in the Ice Arena coffee shop, called the Warm Puppy, just across the street. At his table, he'd have his bacon and eggs and look over the newspaper. But after heart surgery in 1981, breakfast became an English muffin with grape jelly, and only grape jelly. The kitchen staff knew to keep plenty on hand. Once he got to his studio, he'd begin by reading the mail that his secretary had opened and placed in stacks. Then, sitting in a chair next to her desk, he'd dictate his replies. After that, he'd go into his studio, sit down at the drawing board, and begin to work out ideas, making pages of doodles that he'd develop into a final strip later in the day. These that we're looking at were saved from his wastebasket by his secretary, who took them home and ironed out the pages. Around 11:30, he'd leave the studio and walk back to the Warm Puppy for his lunch. On the way, he'd pass some of the landmarks of his life here, like the baseball field. He built it so that the neighborhood kids would have a place to play, not to mention pickup games we'd have with the young staff at the ice arena. Then he'd pass the indoor tennis court we built in 1978. For years, it was like a second home to us. Back at the Warm Puppy, he again sat at his special table and had his lunch, sometimes with a friend or two, but often alone. But always people stopped by to say hello to him. For years, lunch was a tuna salad sandwich and a cup of tea. Here, he felt completely at ease. He was proud that the coffee shop was a place where people could come and just hang out. And that's what he really loved, was just to hang out there. Of course, the best part about the Warm Puppy was that while he was eating, Sparky could keep an eye on his beloved ice rink. The Redwood Empire Ice Arena opened in 1969, and over the years fostered a whole skating culture in Santa Rosa. It's also where Sparky played hockey with his friends every Tuesday night after work, and where for 25 years hockey players came from all over to take part in the senior tournament.
Centers for Schlz. Schlz shoots. He scores! Carl Schlz scores his second of the game. The Diamond Icers lead it.
Afterwards, Sparky would host a barbecue for as many as 1,000 players, complete with a swing band and dancing. Sometime in July, he'd start making plans for the annual Christmas Ice Show, an extravaganza of costumes and staging that brought champion skaters to Santa Rosa from all over the world. Sparky said that watching these skaters rehearse was his idea of happiness. At some point during their time here, he'd ask these skaters to write their names in wet concrete in front of the building, so you can see how much a part of Sparky's life is centered around this ice arena. Another part of his life here was the mall across the road. Sometimes he'd just wander around to get away from the studio, but most often he'd end up at the bookstore. Sparky had a great curiosity about a wide range of subjects from profound to mundane, and made up what he lacked in formal education by being an avid reader. So because this area was the setting for Sparky's life, we looked for an architect who would understand that the museum must, in structure and exhibition space, reflect a sense of this unique place and this singular man. We found him in the person of David Robinson.
The challenge here was to express in a structure that very special quality that the work of Sparky presented to the world. And our approach to doing that from the very beginning was to challenge each of our design decisions against a singular proposition. What would Sparky think? The result of our work, I think, is a building that has a variety of different spaces, from very small for the display of his own original drawings to reasonably large to house large commissions that were done specifically for the museum. In addition, the building includes natural materials like slate, like cherry and oak, which reflects Sparky's Minnesota background. But more important than anything else, I think, we've tried to achieve a informal, comfortable, almost home-like quality in the museum, which we think is best designed to house Sparky's spirit.
Once we began construction on this wonderful building, we looked for a museum director who could tackle the job of how best to present Sparky's work within its walls. We were delighted when Ruth Gardner Bigel came on board.
When I became the director, I knew that one of my most exciting and challenging tasks would be to provide an environment to share Sparky's original work with the visitors. Most people only know his work through the cartoon strips in the newspapers and in the books. They're very small scale, and you really miss that really free, confident line that you see in his originals in the larger format. So what we've tried to do here is provide a place for people to see his work up close so that they could feel the thrill for themselves of seeing that original line work in the cartoon strip. We also wanted people to be able to view Sparky in the context of cartoon history and give them a greater understanding of cartoon art in general. There are some unique things in the museum that few people have ever had the opportunity to see. In one of our most ambitious moves, we decided to recreate Sparky's studio in the upstairs gallery. We also moved an entire wall from a Colorado house where Sparky had lived in 1951, because on that wall was a mural he painted for his daughter Meredith's bedroom. Then we commissioned 2 monumental works by Yoshi Otani with themes that he had discussed with Sparky. One is a massive low-relief sculpture that shows Snoopy morphing into his different personas. The other is a giant tile mural, and it shows poor Charlie Brown's futile attempt to once again try to kick the football held by Lucy. It's made up of more than 3,500 ceramic tiles, each with a different strip image.
So there's a lot to see while you're here. All of us who are part of this museum hope that you go away today with a deeper knowledge and appreciation of that special genius that was Charles M. Schlz.